There are a lot of different conclusions that people are printing from this chart right now, but there is something very specific going on right now that I don't think anybody is talking about. And we're going to be diving into that in this video. The speculative targets from it are insane. And you know me, I'm a grounded guy. I like to keep my analysis realistic. I like to keep things super, super sensible, grounded. And I think that what I'm about to show you is in line with all of that. But before we do get into it, let's just look at why everybody's kind of getting a little bit, just uncomfortable with Bitcoin right now. To be honest, with these lines, it doesn't even look that bad. But if we take a look at this on a slightly different chart, for example, this parallel channel that I drew for you guys earlier on, we are clearly continuing to get rejected at the top level over here, which definitely implies a further drop down to, in this case, the $114,000 level, or at least the midpoint here, which does now sit at around the mid 116s. So definitely implying a little bit of downward price action to come, but we already know that this market is largely going to be moving at the mercy of the S&P 500, which is still performing very well. Last week was a great performance. This week is another great performance, right? It's a small reversal, but we're holding this level incredibly well. So the chart looks pretty decent, but I definitely understand why some people are starting to get a little bit spooked. It's taking a little bit of time. It looks like the support might not hold. We've already deviated below it. And so there's a lot of concerns there. And look, my read on this is pretty straightforward, right? I said to you guys when this drop happened that it's not over until it's over. Bitcoin deviates all the time, and it's entirely possible for this to reverse back up. And that is exactly what happened the very next day. So first of all, huge shout out to those of you that are subscribed to this channel, smashing up the likes, doing all that good stuff, because you are seeing this time-sensitive content when it matters. So that is super, super important. Shout out to those of you that show this channel a little bit of support. I really do appreciate it. And obviously it's still, we're still in a really nice sideways range, right? We've still got a pretty clear resistance up here. We've still got pretty clear support that's helping us. And we're doing all of that inside of a bullish trend. I've said this a million times, and I'm going to keep on saying it because those facts are still true. If we look at this on the daily time frame, this is where the picture starts getting a lot better, and this is what's directly relevant for the rest of the video that I want you guys to really pay attention to. It's this pattern that we're seeing here on the daily. Now, look, as far as consolidation goes, one of the best things that you can kind of ask for is that the price goes up, and then it does something a little bit like this. Maybe you can draw a parallel channel that's, literally just fully sideways, and then eventually you get the breakout, and, hopefully you kind of do the same thing again, and then you get the breakout again, right? Sometimes it looks a little bit more like a triangle, sometimes it looks a little bit more like a rectangle, but ultimately we're seeing the same stuff. We're seeing continuation patterns. And if you just look at this right here, I honestly could end the video right now. This is a healthy consolidation. We're not really doing anything too crazy. We're staying stable. This is price discovery mode. And the S&P is still looking good. As far as the things that I could ask for, this is peak. This is really, really good stuff that I'm seeing on the chart. But it is nothing in comparison to what I'm about to show you. If you're hyped up for this, do me a favor and smash up those likes. And what we've got to do here is actually go ahead and take a look at the Bitcoin chart side by side. And what I'm going to put on the other side right here is actually Bitcoin going back to 2020. Okay, so this is going to be a really, really interesting one. I'm going to hide my camera here so that you can see everything on these charts very clearly. And what we need to do is head on over way back. Let's go back. Let's take a look. Let's put this on the logarithmic scale, and let's take a look at what happened here. So 2024, it's been a large uptrend. 2023, also an uptrend. 22, things were pretty hectic, and 21, we were going up massively. But in the lead up to this rally in 2021, we had this stuff, and this is what I'm going to be focusing on with you today because it's very directly relevant to where we are in this market right now. Now, here's the thing. Here's what we ended up seeing back in 2020. If we go ahead and replay the chart and put it, let's go ahead and put it on the we'll put it on the daily right here. And I just want to draw your attention over to roughly about right here. And what's really interesting about this price action right here is Bitcoin managed to, rally up really, really strong into this zone. It had a couple of, continuation patterns, a couple of, this was almost a little bit more like a triangle that didn't, fully form. But definitely there was something here as far as a continuation pattern. Then we get that nice explosion up. We consolidate a little bit. and we get another explosion up. Now, this is where things are weirdly similar to where we are today, because if we take a look at where we are right now in comparison, we put this on, let's say, the 3-day time frame, we're going to see something very, very interesting here. Take a look at this. This, ladies and gents, to me, looks like it's almost the same damn chart. Take a look at this right here. We've got, Bitcoin rallying up very fiercely up into a key resistance area, which in this case was 20K for Bitcoin, and in this case it was 108 for Bitcoin here. And this is important, right? Because this 20K level for BTC, this is the previous all-time high for Bitcoin going back to 2017. Okay, so this was a big retest when Bitcoin managed to hit this level back in 2020. I know that many of you guys probably weren't even in the market, watching this video right now when this happened. So this is a really important history lesson for you guys. And we basically rallied up to that 20K all-time high, and we consolidated for a little bit before getting an explosion. This is so similar to what we're doing right now. If we draw a line right here, I've actually got to cheat a little bit and move this line roughly about over there. If we trace this back, this was Bitcoin's previous all-time high. This is exactly where Bitcoin topped out in January, and it seems to have done an incredible job for Bitcoin here to allow Bitcoin to just come back down and then retest this level again in exactly the same fashion that Bitcoin did here. Now, granted, this was 3 years later, this was a few months later. So the time frames are a little bit different, but the patterns, and more importantly, the place that these patterns are taking place in, like the area that these patterns are taking place in, that is nearly identical to what we had back in 2020. Okay, take a look at this. If we move this chart over a little bit and really kind of digest what this is showing us, we have been doing the same thing. We rallied right up into the previous all-time high level. We consolidated for a little bit. We got a pop, and now we're in a much healthier consolidation zone, and honestly, not something that's taking too long, right? Back in 2020, we're on the daily time frame here. It only consolidated here for, let's say, about a week. On this occasion here, we've been consolidating here for closer to 3 weeks, but that time frame also makes perfect sense because we understand that Bitcoin is maturing, Bitcoin is slowing down, Bitcoin is getting less extreme with its price action. And with all of that in mind, I think that it's totally reasonable that something previously that took us 1 day is now taking us 3 days. I think that that jump in time frame is super realistic. And by the way, that time frame difference is going to change, right? At different points in the market, Bitcoin's going to behave slower or faster. Right now, 1 to 3 looks like a pretty decent ratio for how Bitcoin might be slowing down in this market in 2025. And we've got the exact same chart pattern forming here, ladies and gents. We've broken above the all-time high. It was a nice move, by the way. If we measure this in percent, that was a 13% move. And if we take a look at this right here, that was a 20% move. I mean, even in terms of percentage gains, we're roughly halving here. Super, super realistic stuff here, ladies and gents. I mean, definitely the kind of thing that I can say that, yeah, this makes sense. This is kind of exactly in line with what my expectations were as far as Bitcoin's performance, because we know that, yeah, it's not going to pump as hard anymore either. And that strongly implies to me another big move up, which, of course, if we go ahead and replay this chart, we can see how this ended up going for Bitcoin. It got pretty crazy pretty quickly. I mean, from this point onwards, it was a 70% pump to the upside, and that's going to be hard to show you on this chart, but I'm going to give it a try anyway. Yep, very, very hard to show you. 70% move up here puts Bitcoin at about $200,000, which I don't think is going to happen, especially on this leg. I think it can definitely happen in this market cycle. I think the chance of that is extremely high, and I actually want to make a separate video about parabolas, the parabolic kind of chart patterns that we end up seeing toward the end of bull markets. I don't think we're anywhere near the end of this bull market right now. I could be completely wrong. I've been wrong about this before, but I don't think we're anywhere near the end of this bull market right now, and that also means by extension that I don't think we've entered any level of parabolic price action yet, and that's a whole separate video. If you want to see that, drop it in the comments. Just type in I want the parabolic video, and if enough of you guys say it, then yeah, 100% I would be very happy to do that for you guys. But if we take a look at where this has taken Bitcoin, huge explosion to the upside here, a very quick explosion. And I honestly think that this is quite well in line with what we've got right now with present day BTC. If we move back to the present day BTC chart in full screen right here, center the chart, we've definitely got, I think, an opportunity for Bitcoin to do something similar to that right now. And again, all it really needs is the S&P 500 to move up, which it already is clearly posturing itself to do. I mean, like I said, pullbacks definitely would be due at this stage. It's been quite some time, well over a month now, that Bitcoin has been that the S&P has pretty much been non-stop rallying, which might be a cause for concern. But like I've been saying before, we've seen this go on for a very long time before. It's not concerning. It can keep going on like this for a while. It is an index at the end of the day. It's only an index. It's not an individual stock. So of course, things are going to be moving, pretty consistently a lot of the time, especially considering that, there's 401ks and all sorts of other stuff that kind of really help prop the S&P 500 up here. But with Bitcoin, how that could relate, I mean, guys, I think that this looks like a pretty decent chart setup. I'm trying to find a naked chart here. I think this looks like a pretty decent chart setup for Bitcoin to absolutely explode upwards. And, like I said, we got a couple of ways that we can kind of extrapolate targets here. It's all the same stuff that we've been discussing already. We can kind of look at, this move from the absolute low to the absolute high, and then extrapolate a target from our absolute low over here to the next potential absolute high, which does put us in the 140s. Granted, we're on the logarithmic scale, so it's a little bit less extreme than this on the linear scale, but it's still very, very nice, with this. And by the way, whether you use linear or logarithmic, that's honestly personal preference. Logarithmic is typically better in my opinion, but I don't really use it because I don't think we need to. It's typically not a huge difference anyway. The target goes from 142 down to 139. But it's giving us some really, really nice speculative targets. And again, it's just a really healthy consolidation zone. You know what I mean? Like, I think that it's definitely looking good. Now, let's take a look at the fear and greed index, which we know isn't perfect, but it's nice to see sentiment quantified. It's the easiest way we can do this. We've got a really, really stable sentiment here. So, when we've got super stable sentiment while we're consolidating and stuff like that, that can definitely indicate that the market is a little bit complacent and indicate that we're going to be dropping down. But I think one perspective here that doesn't really get much attention on these stable fear and greed index numbers is that it also represents that, we're not really looking to take action in this zone. Clearly, the market isn't taking action. We're not really dumping down. We're not really pumping up. And so, to me, that's a neutral sign, right? And if you got a neutral sign, like I said, inside of a, raging, I don't want to say it's a raging bull, but it's close. It's close to a raging bull. I mean, if we measure this from the low, like, you guys are not going to appreciate this if, you want to get rich tomorrow kind of thing. But, I mean, 1,000 days and you're up by, 8x, basically. That's pretty damn impressive. I mean, you can't really ask for a whole lot more than that. So we're in a good bull market. Your opinions might differ, but that's not going to change the facts, and that's not going to change the numbers either. We're in a good bull market right now. And I think neutral signs inside of a bull market, I think we've been over this plenty. Neutral signs inside of a bull market are typically going to end up leaning bullish just because of the kind of market environment that they are in. So I think that's definitely a really, really good sign for the market here, and something that I quite like paying attention to. Now, if we bring this over to the Bitcoin dominance chart, we're seeing Bitcoin dominance creep up a little bit while Bitcoin is just kind of, shaking people out. And that's cool. Nothing crazy. It certainly looks like it's getting ready to take another leg down, because usually when we kind of hit lows on Bitcoin dominance, you tend to kind of reverse those lows pretty quick. And we've had plenty of time to do that. Take a look at this. Each of these lows that we hit, we're reversing them pretty quickly. We're not really hanging around much like we're doing right now. So 100%, it looks like, Bitcoin dominance does want to take another leg down. And if that does end up happening, especially if Bitcoin manages to hold its current price, that's going to mean, some quite crazy explosions in the altcoin market. That said, I'm not crazy for this idea, just purely based off the fact that if Bitcoin does end up moving aggressively again, it's probably going to soak up a lot of liquidity from the altcoins again. And simply, the philosophy behind that is pretty straightforward. If you're getting, Bitcoin rallying up, then that kind of weakens the case for being in altcoins, especially before you go parabolic, especially before things get really crazy, which I definitely don't think that's happened yet. It's just going to feel more compelling to be parked up in the safe asset that's making you money. And then, of course, when that safe asset stops making you money, which is basically when Bitcoin entered this consolidation zone, that's when you start to see dominance dropping, right? So if we take a look at this, we kind of set our high on the 14th of July, and Bitcoin's dominance peaked actually toward the end of June, and it really started to drop on the 14th of July and onwards. So it was only when Bitcoin entered its consolidation range that Bitcoin dominance really started to take a dip. And that's why, even though this is looking like it's going to take another leg down, I would consider this more of a kind of secondary source of information, and it is literally a secondary source of information. So it's going to be weighted a little bit less than my core analysis. And my core analysis, like I said, is definitely telling me that, we've got more upside potential here for BTC. And as we understand very, very well, when BTC is rallying up, let's take a look at this. This was 9th of July to the 14th. I think it was dropping a little bit. Bitcoin dominance was dropping a little bit during this time period, which is somewhat anomalous, but it makes sense because we were reaching the end of Bitcoin's dominance, Bitcoin dominance's run. But for the most part, you are seeing quite aggressive moves up in Bitcoin dominance, regardless whether you're pumping or dumping, because both of those situations make altcoins less appealing. And like I said, if we're getting a big explosion from here, I don't really think that there's going to be a lot of interest in altcoins. I think majors like Ethereum are probably going to be fine, and it looks really good against Bitcoin right now, so that's absolutely fantastic. But other coins, I think they definitely could suffer a little bit. Let's take a look at XRP. Looking pretty decent, finding some support roughly around the midpoint of this support resistance range right here, which is definitely pretty cool. And XRP against the dollar is finding a little bit of support just in the low $3 zone now, which is really, really good. Like I said, this is the first time XRP has ever done something like this at an all-time high, or at least at this all-time high, and to me that makes this a very, very powerful setup that could end up leading the market higher. So it's good. I think things are looking good across the board. I'm just hesitant based on BTC. It's the same take you've heard me say day in and day out. The analysis isn't changing because the charts are not changing particularly much. And in fact, I think they're just looking better and better. I think Bitcoin's daily chart just looks so beautiful and stable right now that I can't really be worried about it. But this video would not be complete if I didn't cover what would happen if I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, if Bitcoin does end up kind of dumping down, I don't think that would be great. We've now been consolidating here, like I said, for 3 weeks. 3 weeks is a pretty decent amount of time to be consolidating. And if you do end up seeing a bit of a dip, that can definitely take Bitcoin into the low hundreds once again. I think easily down to, 100K flat, like anywhere around here. These would be, big pockets of support for Bitcoin to kind of fall into, which I think definitely would make sense for the market to potentially, just try and grab some more liquidity. I think one of the big things we've already seen here is, while the S&P is moving up, but Bitcoin isn't, it's probably just because there have been a lot of longs in this market, and a lot of longs will invariably come with long liquidation hunts. Okay, so if we're getting liquidation hunts like that, then that's definitely going to be something that can drag the market a lot lower. But again, I don't think that's going to happen unless the S&P kind of tops out and reverses a little bit. I don't think Bitcoin on its own is going to have enough weakness to fall down while traditional finance is still doing well, because that's just not really how the money moves, right? And we understand this very well now. It's largely the same money that moves traditional finance, which also moves crypto at this stage. And if that's the case, then we, by extension, we're going to need the blessing of traditional finance. And so, in other words, if traditional finance is good, that same money, I don't think is going to necessarily be betting on Bitcoin moving down too much. So that is definitely interesting. But that doesn't mean that we can't have a big drop later on, right? Like, you can definitely see a big drop, a big pump up to, let's say, 130, followed by a super swift crash down to 100, right? Like, that would be actually quite typical of BTC price action, at least from what I've seen over the last 8 years. So what would I know? But, that's the kind of thing that I'd be expecting as far as pullbacks go. But if they do happen, like I said, we've got this beautiful range down here, and we've got a ton of support as well. If we look at the 𝐒𝐂𝐈𝐿 on the daily, huge zone of support in exactly the same range that I was outlining for you guys, coming in around kind of early August, mid-August. It's where is where this is going to really, really come into play here for us. And on the daily EMAs, it's still looking pretty decent. We got a ton of support from all the way where we are right now, all the way down to about 112. So tons of support, allowing Bitcoin to potentially, kind of bounce off some of the momentum it's built up over these weeks and months. So I think that that's also looking pretty decent. I mean, I can't complain about what I'm seeing here, despite the fact that, yeah, it's a little bit shit to be in consolidation. But if you take your head out of your ass for 5 minutes and stop looking at the 1 hour time frames or the 15-minute time frames or whatever, which, yeah, admittedly, they don't look as good, you're probably going to see that actually the market's still overall in a pretty decent place. And you know what, ladies and gents? If what we are seeing is this parallel channel that's going to end up kind of playing out, this is still an incredibly bullish pattern anyway. So, look, you can draw bearish hypotheses at any point in the market. Ultimately, you can do that. But I feel if you're just kind of looking at this from a more neutral standpoint and you just want to see the facts rather than, imposing your own emotions onto the market analysis that you're doing, you're probably going to end up seeing that things look pretty stable right now. We're inside of an uptrend. There's nothing, untoward happening. Traditional finance is healthy. I think all the factors that really are important are there. And the bearish factors that I'm seeing, I don't know, ladies and gents. I don't really think they're too strong. So we'll have to see. Like I said, I could be wrong about this. I've been wrong about stuff like this before. But yeah, it's looking pretty decent to me overall. So with that, ladies and gents, that's pretty much all for this one. Again, another really quick one. If you have enjoyed this one, check out the beautiful links to strong exchanges in the description down below. Check them out only if you're not from a restricted region. Make sure you smash up those likes, subscribe, click the bell, all that good stuff, and we will see you all in the next video. Cheers.